now you're starting to see some calls for boycotts. The MLB Players Union executive Tony Clark has said that the union would open discussions to moving the MLB All-Star Game from Atlanta. We should note that it's just discussions about having discussions. Nobody has yet moved towards let's pull the game out.
It's going to take things like the MLB, not just having discussions about having discussions, but actually having discussions about what are we going to do here? Because if you start to allow the faucet to drip, it's going to start really leaking. And so you want to nip things off at the bud so that Georgia government in general can understand that, hey, what happened this last election was not a fluke. We do want things to change here. Don't try to slide bills under the nose and think that it's going to be okay. Like, I think people have to really take a stance.
A historic run for the Pac-12 and the NCAA men's tournament on the women's side. The Pagebreakers' Caitlin Clark showdown turned into a Kristen Williams showcase as 3 number ones make the Elite Eight. Tate Frazier of Titus and Tate will be here to talk about it. The busiest NBA trade deadline in 35 years just went down, and that led to a robust buyout market, which sent lots of faces to several new places. The Georgia GOP strikes back. New restricting voting laws have been enacted in the state of Georgia. Taylor Rooks joins us, plus Take Survivor, on this new episode of Take Line. I am Jason Concepcion.
I'm Renee Montgomery. Let's go!
Renee, how was your week? What have you been up to?
What have I been up to in March? Watching a lot of basketball, just like everyone else. And I actually had a day off one Saturday to literally watch all the basketball that I wanted to watch. So, first up, I watched my Huskies get another dub. Kristen Williams, Avina Westbrook came to ball. Olivia Nelson-Adota came to ball. Paige came to ball. But really, Kristen, man. Shouts to Kristen. She came to ball.
Yeah.
What's up with you, Jason? What was you doing this weekend?
I was watching a ton of basketball, just like you. I was watching, for those of you who've been following local LA news, there was an action to evict the unhoused community at Echo Park Lake. I watched that happen from a couple of blocks over because I live in the area. And then I just been watching basketball, following basketball. Watched Paige versus Caitlin Clark. As you mentioned, it turned into a showcase for Westbrook and for Kristen Williams. They just absolutely cut up that zone.
Took over. And not even just on the offensive end.
Yes.
The reason that I keep shouting out Kristen Williams is because, like, MVP, she killed it because she was the one guarding Caitlin Clark. So we talk a lot about Caitlin Clark and how she struggled some that game. Mm-hmm. Kristen Williams was the one guarding her on the one end, and Kristen Williams was the one slicing and dicing on offense. So that's why I keep on saying Kristen Williams because, man, Kristen Williams, have yourself a game.
Woo. Yeah, that was fun. You're more versed in this world than I am, but I got to tell you, I fell in love with Louisville. I love an underdog. I love Dana Evans. I love a scrappy point guard that is just going to, run at you and run at you and run at you. Her shots a little bit shaky, but she is nonstop Energizer Bunny battery pack on her back.
Yeah.
Absolutely
definitely
fun to watch. I loved watching on the men's side of UCLA and Alabama.
That was a wild game.
It's so great. Listen, it's great to have the tournament back. It's the emotions, all of it. The upsets, particularly on the men's side, of course. But I feel like I was what's the one? Is it red pill, the one that wakes you up? The red pill, I forget which it is. I guess I was
blue pill.
Yeah. I feel like I ate the red pill watching that game because I was I watched it and then I was like, wait, have all the games been kind of boring before this? Because this was incredibly fun. UCLA.
Yeah.
Listen. If Alabama hits their free throws, it's a different story.
Yeah.
Okay? But
completely different.
Completely different story. Completely completely different story. We're not talking about UCLA. We're not talking about the Pac-12 in quite the same way, but super fun game. I can't believe they didn't foul at the end of the game. Reese hits the monster three to send it into overtime.
Boy,
but they did end up winning. Again, super fun team. When the buzzer sounded on it, somebody close by in my neighborhood like fired 5 shots in the air. People were like, I saw people on Twitter were like, wait, are you sure? Maybe it was fireworks. I'll tell you right now, it was not. And I'll tell you how I know it was not was the rhythm in how they went off. It wasn't like it wasn't like fireworks in the way that fireworks go off. It was like and it was like, and I'm dead serious about this, it was right when the buzzer went off. Like it was not timed in the kind of way that you could have timed fireworks. It just went off. So LA was excited.
Were ready. They were ready.
They were ready for UCLA to advance. They were ready for USC to advance. Really, really fun weekend of basketball. I expect UCLA to get throttled by Michigan. That said, I enjoyed it. Best game of the tournament for me thus far.
Can't wait for what's next.
I can't wait. We're going to have our good friend Tate Frazier join us to talk some tournament. Okay, with all this college hoops talk, we decided to bring in one of my good friends, the legend himself, Tate Frazier, one half of Titus and Tate. He is, of course, the co-host of the Titus and Tate podcast. Tate Frazier, how are you? How's your tournament been?
I will say this. It has been a whirlwind, to say the least, but it is an honor to be on the show. Very early in the Take Line history of things, so it does feel like an honor, and it's great to be with both of you. And you ask about the tournament. It's not been going great for me, a guy who picked Illinois to win the championship, a guy who believed in Big Ten basketball, but otherwise, all things are going well, guys.
Great way to start this. How did everybody get the Pac-12 wrong?
Whew, that is a long-winded question for me to answer. I think the short of it is, simply America. We have denied West Coast basketball. We have ignored it for as long as we can. Bill Walton goes on ESPN every year. He says it's the best conference in basketball. It's the Conference of Champions. And America says, get it out of my face. They don't win in March. And this year, they're doing it, Jason. And they're doing it in Indiana, which makes no sense. But it's happening, and I'm enjoying it.
I'm just curious, do you think that this year was more madness than normal? And I say that because a lot of people are talking about because the season just was so inconsistent throughout. Do you think that added to the madness of March? Like, did that add fuel to it?
I think there was a mystery right around it. I think a lot of times we have interconference play. We see teams kind of stack up and you have an idea of what is actually the best conference. And this year we let the media, people like myself dictate those terms. And the media said that the Big Ten was the best conference. We when a bad team in the Big Ten beat a good team, we moved that team up and said, hey, Wisconsin's a lot better than we thought they were. In the Pac-12, Oregon loses to Oregon State. We knocked them down out of the top 25. And I think it just compounded over time. And when we got to the actual tournament, the Pac-12 guys have a huge chip on their shoulder. They say, we're just as good as these guys are. We are also 5 stars. We also want to play in the NBA, in case you haven't heard. And we're going to take your lunch. And I think that's what's more happened than not, throughout this tournament. And that's been fun to see.
Just looking around at sports in general and the world in general, it really feels like this is such a weird year.
Yes.
The effects of COVID and COVID protocols on various sports have, it seems to me, created a lot of strange results. You have like 2 centers in the MVP race. If a center wins the NBA MVP, it'll be the first time since Shaq.
Yep.
You've got the Knicks being good. You've got no one in the AP poll picking any Pac-12 team in a top 20, and then here they are. You've got UCLA and USC at this stage at the same time, basically in the first time in history. How much of that is influencing what we're seeing now?
I do think there is a level of, when we talk about a UCLA or a USC or an Oregon State, these teams are obviously hot at the right time. And I know that sounds really stupid to say, but that's kind of what we're dealing with. I mean, UCLA lost 4 games going into the tournament. Yeah, and they could have won all 4 of those games. Like that's the flip side of it. All those games were close. I mean, if Jules Bernard makes a free throw in the first round of the Pac-12 championship, Oregon State gets knocked out, and they're not even in the tournament, right? Like, that's how weird of a domino effect we're dealing with. And I do think UCLA the writing was on the wall that Mick Cronin was going to figure it out. And I think he's ahead of schedule now. I think this team is the perfect Mick Cronin type of team that is, we have offensive weapons in a Johnny Juzang. We have a real guard in Tiger Campbell who can kind of set pace and score and get things going for us, make sure we're okay. And then you have, they've stepped it up on defense, which has been the real calling card for this team in the actual tournament. USC has the number 1 pick in my mind, Evan Mobley. I know America thinks Cade Cunningham is the number 1 pick. I think Mobley's the number 1 pick. I think it is playing out. And when they play Gonzaga and he dominates Drew Timme, America will say, I think I know who the number 1 pick is. He's right there. And I think that's a little bit, people have dismissed Mobley maybe or haven't taken him into account as much as they should have. And that's why USC is there. At Oregon State, Wayne Tinkle's done a great job. Give them credit. But I am still shocked that they're in the Elite Eight. And when you say that, I still almost don't believe it. So I will give them their credit.
Okay, so Tate, I know you're a Tar Heel.
Yes.
And I'm used to that meaning a lot.
Oh, yes,
and this year, you guys got knocked out by Wisconsin. This is not the normal UNC way. What's going on? What's going on over there with your Tar Heels?
Renee, you're making a great point. I don't know what's going on. What's happening is that, we had guys like Kobe White, who comes to North Carolina. We expect him to stay maybe 2 years. And the NBA, I blame the NBA, right?
You expect him to stay 2 years? Wait, do y'all really expect your good players? Now, you might have heard it here first. Do you all really expect your good players to stay more than 1 year?
Look, Renee, I'll explain it like this. So I grew up and I watched Marvin Williams come off the bench and win a championship in 2005. That's like my seminal moment in time where I say, wow, you sacrifice for the greater good. We win the championship and we win the championship and you go number 2 in the draft and, everyone's happy. So that's what it's blinded by. Kobe, I understood why Kobe had to leave. I was so happy when he went and was a lottery pick. I was so happy for Cam Johnson as well. This year, Day'Ron Sharpe, he's our guy. He's going to go to the league. I was told by, the bloggers that small ball was everything the NBA cared about. So I'm thinking to myself, this 7-footer is okay. They don't want 7-footers anymore. He wants to stay and develop his game. There's nowhere for him to go.
Somebody lied to you.
They lied to me.
7-footers. They want 7-footers, but they want the 7-footers to move like a guard, to shoot like a guard, to behave like a guard. So don't let them fool you. They want the 7-footers, but they want an international style where they can do guard things.
Which is why Gonzaga owns college basketball, because Gonzaga, they watch FIBA basketball, and Mark Few said, hey, I like the way that they play. I think that's going to translate into the future of basketball. And now you have guys like Walker Kessler, who was at Carolina, and says, hey, I want to transfer to Gonzaga.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm hurt, Renee, to say the least.
Not to open up any wounds.
I mean, it must give you some solace that, some of the titans of college basketball were very shaky. It's not just UNC this year. Obviously, Duke not around, Kentucky not around. Does that give you some amount of solace in this? You're not.
Does that make you feel better?
Yeah, it's just not just the Tar Heels alone that must bear this burden.
It does feel like, in high school when you fail a test and you go home and you tell your parents and you're like, everyone in the class failed. And they're like, I don't care about everyone in the class. I care about you. And that's what Carolina basketball is a little bit like this year. Like, I've had a lot of Duke fans, Kentucky fans, like you said, Kansas fans, even after they lost, reach out to me and say it's a Mickey Mouse tournament. That's what everyone is calling it.
That's right. Yes, you guys have been hitting that hard, the Mickey Mouse tournament.
my favorite thing to say about a tournament that has nothing to do with Mickey Mouse and also confuses people that don't know the NBA, trolls that say that. But in general, I think the Blue Bloods have gotten together. We're gonna have dinner with each other. We're gonna, try to get reacclimated with this new world. And Gonzaga, I think, is the new blood, is what they're calling it. So it's the new blood versus the Blue Bloods, and the Blue Bloods are struggling.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously we're taping this on a Monday. A bunch of games happening by the time this podcast hits the air. Predictions, though. Any predictions? You want to give us any predictions on either side of the men's or women's brackets? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I will say this. I am like I'll start with the women's side. I am like a Dawn Staley apologist. Like I love Dawn Staley. I love South Carolina basketball. Yeah, there's a lot of people that assume that I'm a North Carolina guy, so therefore I hate South Carolina. But they all forget that Frank McGuire, my guy who came from St. John's, went to North Carolina. Then he got ran out of town for Dean Smith, and then he went to South Carolina. And I still supported Coach McGuire. I like Coach Martin. Asia Wilson's one of my favorite modern, women's basketball players.
Shouts to Asia.
Yeah. So, 2017, North Carolina wins the title. South Carolina women's team wins the title. That was a special year for basketball for me. So the South Carolina side, I'm pulling for them. Texas scares me, though. I should say that. That's going to be what they call a bad matchup in the business. But and then on the other side of the men's side, Gonzaga, it's Gonzaga's title to win. If they go 32-0 in Bob Knight's backyard in Indiana, first time since 1976. I mean, the history, the implication, it's very cool. So I think Baylor-Gonzaga is my title game. I think Gonzaga makes history. Fingers crossed, South Carolina basketball, I'm pulling for you.
I love it.
I love that you are in tune with the women's game, but I'ma just sit like, okay,
look, UConn's too good. Like I can't even pull for him. It's like Barcelona soccer or something. I'm like, I'm happy for them when they win, but like I can't be a fan. I love it.
Tate, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you guys so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Listen, NBA trade deadline was hot. It was lit. It was, as I understand it, the busiest trade deadline in 35 years, 16 trades, 23 teams, 46 roster players, a lot of movement. Then after that, the buyout market was as hot as I've ever seen it. Usually we're not talking about the buyout market in the way that we talked about it this year with LaMarcus Aldridge moving, with Andre Drummond moving. Any thoughts about the trades that happened last week?
Yeah, my thoughts are, I feel bad because a lot of times the trade deadline, while for fans, it's so exciting. But my first thought is Lou Williams' post. He said he almost quit basketball.
Wow.
Like think about that. And I've been traded mid-season before too. So I know that feeling. And so trade deadlines, like even like as like a former player now, I used to hate trade deadlines. I used to like want them to come and pass so quickly. Even before I ever got traded, I wanted them to come and pass because you got to think about it. You're connected to your teammates. You're connected to your coaches. Lou Will could have had plans that weekend with the homies. And then it's just all of a sudden, like, we're here in Atlanta, like, hey, when's Lou going to be here? And I'm like, it's so for me, trade deadlines is always when I see 16 trades, 23 teams, 46 roster players, I'm like, man, that's a lot of people affected. Like that's what I think. And I know it's the business of sports, but I'm always going to be an athlete. So that's my first thought.
Would you tell people don't text me on trade deadline day because I just don't want to see my phone like lighting up at all? Like what was your relationship to your phone during that time?
Yeah, it's scary because you don't want any text. So when you check your phone, I keep my phone on silent at all times, first of all. But right when you see it light up, you're like, who is it? Oh, okay, it's just my sister or it's just my cousin. But you just don't want to see that text. And then for some players, you do. So some players, they want to get out of their situation. But a lot of times as a player, you become so invested in that city, that team. I mean, Lou Will like laid it out in his post. He talked about he gave his blood, sweat, and tears to LA to wake up from a nap and find out he's a part of the Atlanta Hawks now. So just so people to put it in perspective for the athletes, I know that people are going to say, oh, they make $1 million. Of course, you can move from team to team. But again, athletes have feelings. It's hard for people to comprehend that, but athletes have real emotions.
The other thing is, listen, I know the vaccines are rolling out. We're still in COVID times. That's the other thing that makes this really complicated and really fraught, actually, because, moving around the country is stressful in the best of times. It is extremely stressful now as, COVID-19 continues to be out there. It's just not a fun situation. You mentioned that trade.
And just for people that have a hard time understanding, imagine that if right now your boss said, hey, we're relocating you to the other coast. So if you're on the West Coast, your boss says, hey, you're leaving LA. You're now going to be working from Atlanta. Oh, by the way, you need to do it in 3 days. I mean, just imagine if your boss said that to you. I think the union would probably throw a fit. You would probably want people to know about it. If they told you don't have a choice, that's your job. So just to put it in perspective, and again, I know it's part of business, but I always want to say that. I also want to say thank you for freeing Andre Drummond. My goodness, it has been a century. He last played March 12th, missed 16 straight games.
Wow.
Literally healthy as can be, was just sitting on the sidelines waiting to be used. So I'm glad they freed Andre Drummond.
So the Lakers picked up Andre Drummond on the buyout market. He agreed to a buyout with the Cavaliers. He's averaging 17 and about 13 and a half rebounds this season. Chris Herring over at Sports Illustrated had a really interesting article about rebounding and its value in the modern game. It's been, I think, people kind of know that offensive rebounding has been a thing that has kind of been eschewed by basketball strategists in recent years. It's more important to get back and cover defensively. But, you've got Andre Drummond, who's basically the best rebounder in the game, has now been bought out. I think that the way things ended in Detroit and now Cleveland, he's a player who, for all the numbers, it's tough to see how he fits into a winning scheme. I do think that LA is the perfect place for him because LeBron James has proved that if you're a player who needs to figure out how to win, maybe has a shaky reputation for whatever reason, J.R. Smith, Dwight Howard, that if you play next to LeBron, it becomes crystal clear because he will tell you what your role is. It will be clear from playing within that scheme what you need to do. So Andre Drummond, can you just rebound, block shots, play defense? That's what we need you to do. More interesting is what happens to Gasol now. But I think that's the perfect place for Andre Drummond going forward is the Lakers.
Yeah, and I think you hit it. LeBron won championship with Golden State Warriors, so he had already started on the right path. But I can just remember his maturation process. And then when you see him with the Lakers, I mean, he was a very good role player, solid. You didn't see any of the Shaq in the full moments that you might have seen in the past. He was a solid player that when he came in the game, I was like, oh, JaVale's in, you better look out. So yeah, to that point, LeBron makes players around him better.
Exactly. We'll be right back after this.
Takeline is brought to you by Expensify, the most widely used expense management platform in the world, with over 10 million users. Your time is precious, so Expensify makes it easy for you to get paid back. Manage your bills, invoices, travel, and other expenses all in the Expensify app, so you can focus on what matters to you. You've tried submitting expenses before and lost a receipt, right? I know I have. It's so frustrating. That one receipt you're looking for got lost in a bag or a suitcase. Y'all know that I'm a businesswoman. There's so much involved when you're an entrepreneur trying to keep your personal expenses separate from your business expenses. It can be a nightmare. It's 2021, people. We got stuff to do. No more wasting time out of our precious day doing expenses. You know who saves time using Expensify? Crooked Media. That's right. The Crooked family uses Expensify to submit expenses. With Expensify, you don't have to worry about all those expense problems. You just take a picture as soon as you get the receipt and toss it. Better yet, link your credit card and they'll auto-match the receipt to the expenses and submit the report for you automatically to your manager controller. Business admins use Expensify to digitally manage your company's money so you never forget a receipt, bill, or invoice again. Also, managing employee expenses is easier than ever with the Expensify card. And for the employees using Expensify, you can get reimbursed as soon as the next day. Oftentimes, controlling expenses can be a difficult task that consumes us, and we spend more than we earn without realizing it. With Expensify, you can take control of your expenses. Expensify is built for companies of all sizes. That's why it's the #1 preferred app to manage expenses, saving you precious time and money along the way. Start your 30-day free trial today by heading over to expensify.com/takeline. That's Expensify, EXPENSIFY.com/takeline. We'd like to thank Expensify for sponsoring the show.
Support for Takeline comes from Lord Jones, makers of the world's finest CBD products. If, like pretty much everyone else, you've been honing your self-care routine lately, do yourself a favor and let Lord Jones show you just how good it feels to bring CBD into the mix. The absolute gold standard in CBD products, Lord Jones is the only name you'll need to know when exploring inside and out self-care. You can boost your evening wind down with a relaxing soak using their best-in-class CBD-infused bath salts. Get a sweet start to your daily meditation with handmade hemp-derived CBD gumdrops. Treat yourself to the head-to-toe royal glow with Lord Jones's luxurious and calming face and body products. I like the CBD gumdrops myself. It's a stressful time right now. It has been for quite a few months to a year to several years, and taking one of the gumdrops in the evening really helps me relax. Everyone needs a routine. Pro athletes, amateur athletes, regular stay-at-home wannabe athletes. Part of my routine of late has been the CBD gumdrops from Lord Jones. No matter which self-care route you take, Lord Jones has you covered. You can feel good knowing all their products are lab-tested for purity and consistency. For years, people in the know have been using Lord Jones premium CBD products in their self-care rituals. Why not see what they can do for you? Go to lordjones.com/takeline to get 25% off your first order. That's lordjones.com/takeline for 25% off your first order. lordjones.com/takeline. And we're back. So last week, Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, signed a voting bill into law real quick after it was passed by the state legislature and engineered by Republicans in the state. SB 202, off the bat, it's easy to see that it limits access to the voting booth for voters of color. It is specifically aimed at voters of color who, of course, swung the runoff election for the Democrats with electing 2 Democratic senators from that state. There's already been 2 lawsuits filed against the bill. This comes at a time as Democrats are making a push to pass voting reform with H.R. 1, the For the People Act. Renee, you are, of course, from the area. You live in Atlanta. Your thoughts about the bill and how people should be discussing it, how we should be trying to fight against it?
Yeah, this bill is obviously a reaction to what happened this past election.
Yes.
This past election, everything that happened this past election, you can see it in the bill. Voters, there were 1.3 million voters that used the option of voting by absentee by mail, right? So, of course, they're going to address that. Now voters need either a driver's license, state ID number, or if they don't have those, a copy of an acceptable voter ID. They're trying to make the paperwork difficult so that maybe if people don't have it, they might not just bother. So to me, it's very reactionary. Of course, I don't support a bill like that. Just by even putting this bill out, 4 years ago, I don't necessarily know if people would have been as up in arms, just because there was this awakening moment in 2020 where people were like, what is really going on with the government? And then when people started to dive deeper and deeper in what's really going on, people didn't necessarily like it. This SB 202 Election Integrity Act of 2021, that's what it's called. We don't like it. I don't know how else to put it, but we don't like it because obviously it's trying to stop empowerment. Voter empowerment. This is like the standard voter suppression bill.
Now, in the run-up to this, it seemed like it was going to be – the bill is very bad. It seemed like it was going to be a lot worse. There was some stuff rumored to be in there that would target specifically the Souls to the Polls organizing and really try and stamp that down. But, the stuff that's in there is pretty bad. One of the stipulations is that now only official poll workers can pass out food and water within 100 feet of a building that serves as a poll. Yeah, so obviously they're cutting down on the areas specifically in Black communities where people can vote. The lines already for the last national election were extremely long. People are waiting in line. So people are handing out food and water. And now, in theory, someone who is not a poll worker who hands out bottles of water to people waiting in line could actually be charged with giving people water, people who are waiting in line to cast votes. Unbelievable.
And that was like my whole thing. Me, myself, I could be charged. And the reason I say that was my whole thing, that's what I did all 2020. I started out by handing waters, which is kind of what people saw me doing in the very beginning. Then I threw a pop-up block party. But the reason that even when it came to the polls and stuff, the reason that people started to hand out waters and hand out food was because the lines were so long that you wanted to almost encourage people to stay. You make it fun. You give them drinks and refreshments, give them a snacky.
Yeah.
But when you see stuff like that, you can see that they're trying to take the joy out of what happened. So yeah, there was voter suppression happening already before. And you saw the lines were long lines. And now they're like, you're not going to have fun in those lines. No more. We don't want any more of that fun stuff. It's like, what?
Another thing the bill does is it takes power for oversight of the elections from the Secretary of State and moves it to the legislature. In other words, so the Secretary of State no longer has the power to certify elections, raising the possibility that a Democratic candidate winning an election in Georgia may just not be certified. Like they would just investigate it, I guess, until it just goes away and disappears. A lot of really, really, really troubling stuff that is obviously a response to the recent Democratic wins. Now you're starting to see some calls for boycotts. The MLB Players Union executive Tony Clark has said that the union would open discussions to moving the MLB All-Star Game from Atlanta. We should note that it's just discussions about having discussions. Nobody has yet moved towards let's pull the game out. It's, hey, let's talk about whether we should talk about moving the game out. So we're hoping that moves on. Of course, there's been calls to boycott Coca-Cola. Georgia has a really robust tax break for the film industry. Thus far, we've only seen director James Mangold, who directed Ford versus Ferrari, also directed Logan. We've only seen him say that he would not do any movies in Georgia.
Right,
the city, the rebates that they have there are really big. So it's
significant.
Among the productions that have been shot in Georgia for just the TV side, you've got Atlanta, Stranger Things, Ozark, The Walking Dead. You get a 20% tax credit for filming in Georgia if you put the Georgia Peach logo on. Just putting the Georgia Peach logo on, that gives you 10% on top of that. The city also offers a 10% rebate on qualified spending in the area, plus they cover $2,000 in moving expenses per household for crew members that have to relocate to the city. So it's no wonder that a lot of productions end up filming there. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. What do you think in terms of boycotts, in terms of productions pulling out? What do you think these corporations and these brands and these various productions should do? Whose lead should they follow when trying to figure out what their engagement should be with the state of Georgia?
Yeah, they should follow their moral compass. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think that we all, for instance, the NBA moved the 2017 All-Star Game out of Charlotte in protest of North Carolina's so-called bathroom bill, which discriminated against transgender people. The NFL stripped down the 93 Super Bowl from Phoenix after the Arizona voters rejected propositions about MLK Jr. Day. What they should do is apply that pressure. And what that pressure is the money that you talked about. Imagine if the film industry, Atlanta talks about, you can just hear the chatter in Atlanta all the time talking about how big the film industry is growing. Every month, something else is being filmed. You hear about new things happening here in Georgia every year. So does the Georgia government want to slow that down? I know that's a big moneymaker. So it's going to take things like the MLB, not just having discussions about having discussions, but actually having discussions about what are we going to do here? Because if you start to allow the faucet to drip, it's going to start really leaking. And so you want to nip things off at the bud so that Georgia government in general can understand that, hey, what happened this last election was not a fluke. We do want things to change here. Don't try to slide bills under the nose and think that it's going to be okay. Like, I think people have to really take a stance.
Yes. So for things like boycotts, which, if not done in a kind of like surgical and precise and knowledgeable way, can end up hurting the people you're trying to help. We want to follow the lead of organizations on the ground, local organizations like Fair Fight and people like Stacey Abrams, who are directly involved in organizing in the state of Georgia. And we want to make sure that the actions, whatever actions are taken, don't end up hurting the people that we want to help. It feels like people are really paying attention this time. And, usually like the cadence of politics is the national elections come around and people pay attention, and then they happen, and then people kind of go like, okay, now I'm going to go back to my life, and they check out. I'm thinking specifically about the response to Delta Airlines, based in Georgia, released a statement that was pretty positive towards the bill, basically saying something to the effect of this law fostering a balanced approach, and it's supporting fair elections. They actually are put forth that this bill, it was somehow expanding access to voting, and then I saw a lot of people say, okay, we're gonna boycott Delta. It makes What do you make of this? Like I was surprised.
So Jason, it broke my heart. It broke my heart because just if you live in the Atlanta area, you see the billboards, you've seen the stance that Delta has taken during the whole movement. Delta made sure that the community in Atlanta, whether it's with advertisements, billboards, on the highways, you could just see it all over. They made sure that you knew where they stood when it came to do Black Lives Matter or not. They made sure you knew the answer was yes. And so then to see them follow up what I think was a great promotional campaign, because I believe, like I said, it broke my heart. I am Team Delta. I usually tell people when I fly, like, I only fly Delta. Like I tell people that are booking me because I really enjoy Delta. And not just that, Delta actually stopped working with the Atlanta Dream this past season because they didn't think that our previous ownership's views aligned with theirs. So for them to even do that, and again, further show where they stand when it came to the movement, I'm seeing what's going on here. And I'm like, this has to be oversight. Like, this, and then the statement came out and it's like, maybe they don't know what's in the bill, but I want Delta to figure it out, because again, Delta has been an ally. And I say that, and I never know what Delta has donated in what different ways, but Delta has shown that they want to be an ally. And so I want them to show it more by fixing what they've done when it comes to SB 202. Like SB 202 is unacceptable. We know that. Delta knows that. Yeah. So I think Delta has to just go back to being Delta. I don't know how this happened, but Delta needs to be Delta.
I think one of the things that is not surprised me, but that has struck me throughout all of this is, after the presidential election, Georgia was at the foremost of everyone's minds, the topic of a lot of conversation because of the pressure put on local reps there to, fudge election results and not certify stuff. And, the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, among others, spoke out really strongly about the pressure being put on them and how dangerous it was and how, somebody could be hurt or killed because of like the calls to delegitimize the election that took place there. And then you turn around and you look, and a lot of these people who spoke out so strongly against that pressure are the people who are supporting this bill, who are putting this bill through.
Crazy.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, they didn't want to go that far, but they do want to go pretty far in undermining democracy in the state of Georgia.
Facts. And it's interesting because if you're not paying close enough attention, that's how people get confused. Like, Jason, you're reading everything that comes across your desk, and I'm reading different things. But if you just associate, oh yeah, he was the guy that did this, so let's follow him. That's where
he's anti-Trump. That was good.
Yeah, you see, but that's where it gets tricky. So that's why I always tell people, everything I do is, I tell people, educate yourself. Like, you can't just trust one source. Unfortunately, the media is always going to be a bias. There's usually a human writing whatever you're reading. So that comes with bias inside of it. So I never just read one thing, but I tell people they have to educate themselves, because it gets tricky in these politics. There's a lot there. So you have to be educated.
Yeah. So one of the things that, the way the Democrats are trying to fight this is with federal legislation. H.R. 1, the For the People Act, it would put in place voter protections that would override state-level voter suppression. It would end partisan gerrymandering. It's expand voting access through automatic voter registration, modernizing voter registration by requiring states to have online voter registration. It would expand early voting and vote by mail. It would do many, many, many things. This would likely mean, and we hope this would mean, reforming the filibuster, which is an outdated Jim Crow era Senate rule that requires 60 votes for legislation to pass, that empowers minority rule in this country. Of course, Michelle Obama has an initiative about this, with numerous big names signed to it, many athletes as well, Chris Paul, Jason Tatum, Shaq. One of the things you can do to get involved is by going to votesaveamerica.com/for the people. There's all the info there about H.R. 1 and how you can be involved. Stay involved with this, because people are trying to take away democracy.
Stay engaged
in these communities and in the states that helped swing the election for Joe Biden. Can't let it happen. Stay with us, because after the break, we got Taylor Rooks on the show to give us knowledge on the NBA bubble, and about her lived experience as a woman of color in journalism. Don't go anywhere.